Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review for Fantastic Four Issue 5 2022. Yeah, crazy ass looking cover, which kind of fits with kind of what goes on in here and what happens to the Fantastic Four, which I always like when that actually happens. It doesn't always have to call back and showcase what's going on, but it's nice to have a connection with the story. So, we last left the Fantastic Four off, and they'd come back together and decided to, check in on Petunia. So, we essentially get back to them. They are on the road. There's, a giant kind of, traffic pileup in pretty much the middle of nowhere. And it's just I don't know, let's check it out and see if we can help or whatnot. And then they're also searching for places to go for, lunch afterwards, which is kind of interesting. And Reed putting in his, I found the offering at Goblin Nation unobjectable in the past. But then, of course, Sue has gone forward to scout ahead, and we find people that I am not really that well-versed in lore-wise of Nicholas Scratch and his loyal children, Salem's Seven. So, everybody's got to get into the Fantastic Four kind of route. It's okay, that looks like it'll, deal with some kind of crazy stuff. And so, we get Reed being I have a real problem with magic, and it's yes, I really like this issue for showcasing Reed's kind of problems with magic and how he kind of deals with it. It's really good to kind of get him out of his element and to see how he thinks through that kind of problem that we get to as this kind of goes on. And then, of course, we do get them talking, Ben being didn't we banish him to another dimension or whatnot? And we stopped his hostile takeover of New Salem, and his kids have the wacky kind of powers. Johnny pretty much screwing around with this Hydron dude, being yeah, Hydron, the water guy, got it. No, just Hydron. And then, of course, he's spraying the water on him, but it's just mainly making it into a sauna, and Johnny's yeah, you're not really helping here. Of course, Sue's pretty much trying to ask what Scratch wants, and Scratch wants his children to know what it looks like. When their father gets his revenge. And then we see he does some kind of spell that brings up the Fantastic Four and shuffles them through, a dimension or whatnot. I was what the heck? And, of course, Reed's, reiterating, I have a real problem with magic! And that, one, I like the art style that we've had throughout this run, but this is really kind of crazy and cool, and would be really fit in, a Doctor Strange comic. So, yeah, I wouldn't mind that at some point. And they're everything looks crazy, but but it don't hurt any. Nothing's where it should be. I can't target him. And then we see that they kind of fall down and they don't look the worse for wear. And Scratch is Ben's is that all you got? He's as a matter of fact, it is. Come, children, we return to the Dark Dimension. And, of course, Torch tried to, blast some flames at him, but they've got their own kind of protection as well. And he's yeah, we won't see them again. Yeah, you better run. And then we see that the Fantastic Four seem to be alright, and that everybody kind of pissed at them, thinking that they're the cause of the pile-up, and just kind of just yelling at them and everything. And they just pretty much are ignoring them. They're not really, they're trying to get out of the way as fast as possible. Let's see. And Sue's just trying to figure out, him blocking traffic like that is just really kind of beneath him, because he's, tried taking over the world and the underworld multiple times. And then Reed's just yeah, let's go get some lunch. Let's see here. So, they stop at this place that is kind of like McDonald's. And, of course, Johnny, since he's just pretty much in his Speedo kind of thing, it's God, no shoes, no shirt, no shoes should mean extra service. And then, of course, things extolling how he's got a good metabolism and everything. But then we see that everybody starts having stomach issues. And they all of the Fantastic Four rush to the bathroom. It's what the hell's kind of going on? And Ellie's just are you guys okay? And Stretcho here broke the one rule in a public bathroom and started talking in his stall, saying he figured out what Scratch did to us, and then he, of course, had to verify and everything like that. And, of course, he starts running through his kind of scientific method, where he's okay, all of us We all ate the same food. Alicia didn't get affected, so it can't be anything with her. Scratch never touched us. His spell lifted us, briefly distorted us, but none of that should be affecting our digestion. And then, okay, it's not poisoning. Good to know. Acted like he won, so I began to reason under the assumption that he had. How could magically distorting us guarantee his victory? And he's being like, okay, let's look at this scientifically. What could he have done? He could have access to an alternate dimension, literally, for once. And then, of course, brings about how we can only, we have access to pretty much 3 dimensions, that Scratch could have found a way to use the dark dimension to access not just the 3 spatial dimensions that we live in, but a 4th one, a higher one, and rotated us through that. It's like, ooh, that's interesting. Let's see. And they're, the rest of the, Ben and Johnny are pretty much thinking through. He's like, I don't feel extra dimensional. Johnny's like, I was right-handed this morning, I'm right-handed now. What's going on here? And, of course, Reed's kind of running through, like, we are the same at the macro level. We've just been rotated across the dimension, and we can't access. The only effect is comparatively minor. It's reversed the handedness of our DNA, RNA, and amino acids, which they then explain why that would be a pretty horrible thing to do. The biggest thing is, I like that we got the action in the beginning. We get some more action later on, but this is like some heavy kind of science stuff, and I like how they're able to explain it in a nice, clear, and kind of concise way. And then Sue's like, mirror life, oh god, honey. And then Ben's like, can you explain that to us? And they're talking about how molecules essential for life can be built in one of 2 ways, and each are a reflection of each other. However, all life we've encountered is built using only one of them. Proteins use only left-handed amino acids, DNA only right-handed sugars. We're not sure why. And I love that. It's like, this is what we know. We don't know why. And, of course, shows that mirrored molecules would work identically. They've never been found. There's an entirely hypothetical form of life until now, until us. And then pretty much laying out that they're incompatible with this universe, which is like, oh god, that's a pretty big problem. And then Alicia's like, oh, okay, the thing is your bodies couldn't digest the food. Yes. Like, because they can't handle that, they can't eat. They pretty much starve to death. It's like, holy shit. And then Johnny's like, okay, we just gotta rotate ourselves back, right? Like, we could do that. In the vernacular of you and your peers, Johnny, hell yeah, that's a thing we can do. I'm like, yeah, okay. I love it when Reed's able to actually use that correctly. And then, of course, Reed's like, hell yeah, that's the dark dimension we're looking for. And Johnny's like, listen, the first one was good. The second one was no good. And then Alicia's like, wait, the Fantastic Car can travel between dimensions? Not on gasoline it can't, but it can record a full spectrum of the EM, a full scan of the EM spectrum around it, and it can play that back, which, if we're lucky, means we can duplicate the exact mechanism required to, well, open a portal to the dark dimension. Hell yeah? I'll allow it. As he then utilizes that to pretty much copy the portal to the dark dimension, which I think is actually pretty cool. It's like, that is a very handy thing for the Fantastic Four to have. Of course, Ben says that they'll be back soon, and they go through and start fighting in the dark dimension. And that's crazy. We're like, holy shit. And I love this because this isn't the usual kind of place you see the Fantastic Four, and you see them utilizing their powers pretty fucking awesomely, especially with Ben yelling out, it's clobbering time! It's like, yeah. And of course we see that Scratch and his Salem 7 have already moved on, and they're just pretty much fighting demons, and Ben's like, being like, yeah, it's pretty good that, like, you can punch on pretty much everything and anyone here, and he's like, of course it's got, there are downsides as the demon pretty much smacked him up, and he then falls into some water, and Sue is able to help him, but remember this for later, my good folks. And the plan is pretty much to buy Reed time as we see him start to try and figure out how to rotate them through the dimensions. And then, of course, we get the nice explanation of Reed's thought process, which is a good thing to do, and it's a hard thing to do, because sometimes Reed's thought process can be incomprehensible, but I think this is enough of a balance of where it's like, it makes sense of his logical kind of lines, where he's like, trying to force himself to find a way to see four-dimensionally, but also to push himself through it. And what he's kind of doing, it's a hard task, borderline impossible. And everything with like his body and mind, he's got to expand it, and he kind of focuses, directs his entire being towards his limits and stretches them out. And he's the only one that would be able to do that. As we see him go kind of crazy looking, and it's like, holy shit. And even Johnny's like, whoa, as we see that Reed is doing this on Ben, Johnny, Sue, and himself all at the same time. And then we see him do it. It's like, this is kind of crazy level shit, and like, this shit that would kind of work. And they're able to do it, and Reed's just kind of like nuts. He's kind of like in every kind of place. It's like, yeah, trying to see in different dimensions like that, opening up your mind to that kind of awareness and all that. Dr. Stephen Strange would definitely be able to like now talk to him about some stuff and be like, yeah, that's kind of hard to do, isn't it? And of course, Reed's kind of like out there, and they pretty much just get their way back to the portal and have Alicia pretty much shut it off at the right moment, and we see a demon arm kind of just be like chopped off, which it's almost like a given if you're doing a portal that you have some kind of creature thing trying to reach out. Like, it's a trope that I like, and I'm like, only if it's like really executed poorly do I not like it, but on these kind of ones I'm like, yeah, it always has to try and reach out. And then we see that Reed's like, alright, listen, you need to burn off all the moisture on Ben right now. And Ben's like, I don't mind being damp, but Reed's understanding it because he got wet. And it's like, it's critical because in the dark dimension, despite its name, it's abundantly well lit. Light is energy, and where there's energy, there's usually light. Even if a cell of photosynthesizing bacteria from the dark dimension was on you when I rotated you back to normal, it would now be mirrored instead. And then Ben's just like, it would starve, wouldn't it? Not if they're photosynthetic. They could just live off water and sunlight. And not just live, they'd thrive, as they'd be incompatible with all predators. Photosynthesizing mirror bacteria would expand across the planet without limit, displacing normal bacteria. Its foundation now lost and inedible, Earth's entire food chain would crash. It would mean total global extinction for all life except the mirror bacteria. It's like, that sounds completely and utterly fucking horrible. And this could potentially have been Scratch's kind of endgame goal. In that, yes, he just came in to be like, Fantastic Four, I will make sure that you starve to death here. But he could have been like, hey, I've got a win scenario for me in both cases. You either starve to death, or you try and flip yourself back and do something that creates a kind of scenario where this would happen. Now, granted, I would think it would take more of a Doctor Doom level kind of intellect to kind of think on that kind of contingency plan. So I'm not going to give him the complete benefit of the doubt, but it's like, yeah, holy shit. And then they're like, okay, how far are we from Aunt Petunia's? Just a couple more days of driving. And in a nice straight line, no less, you ask me. I had enough rotations to last me a year. And then we see that there's still a puddle. And then we see a bird. Land in the puddle. And then fly away. As it says, next, crashing the Earth's entire food chain. So, yeah, that is going to be a bear of a time for the Fantastic Four to try and fix that there. Let's see. And then we just get a preview of nice art there. Ooh, an Avengers assembling. Yeah, so I enjoyed this one because I liked that it was just kind of odd and random, and was nice kind of a come down of, we got some heavy information, we got the Fantastic Four back, and we just got a silly, crazy scenario that is going to evolve into an even kind of crazier scenario of where it's like, hey, I didn't know about these people, and I love when they do deep cuts into certain kind of lore on certain kind of things, and I'm not well versed with them, and they do a good job of explaining it for me without feeling like I had info dump. Like, they explained who this dude was, Scratch and his children, and he just did this scenario that the Fantastic Four had to solve. And granted, Reed was the main focus here of trying to figure out how to fix this. Now, granted, when we get into the whole food supply chain, we could potentially be seeing Reed's sister that was introduced in Dan Slott's run, brought in because she was seeing what was going on with sea levels and other kind of food chain things, so that would be an interesting kind of thing. Reed's definitely going to be needed to help figure out and fix the food chain thing. Like, I do like that even when that there's unintended consequences of actions and that we're going to be having to deal with the repercussions of those actions. It's like, oh god. But it'll be interesting to see how Johnny and Ben and Sue might help Reed figure out how to fix the food chain, because I understand that, like, that's usually not their kind of areas of expertise. Johnny's usually like, hey, I'm the hot shot, and Ben usually likes to do the clobbering time and be the one to, like, defend his family when needed. And Sue, she's good too, using her powers to shield people, get in, do some crazy ass shit, and she's just as intelligent as well. And I just can't wait to see how they kind of, like, figure it out and help and do their own kind of stuff, because Reed has the kind of big kind of concepts that he can, like, do like the minutiae kind of details, while Sue is able to kind of bridge that gap and explain that to other people and think about stuff in her own kind of way. Like, Reed's got the advantage of being Stretcho and can, like, stretch his brain and shit. You know what I mean? Like, each have their areas, and that's a big kind of problem with the food chain pretty much dying because of mirrored bacteria. It's like, oh god, let's see how this kind of works and how other kind of stuff works into it as well. And this is legacy number 698. We are 2 away from 700 for the Fantastic Four. So we will see how that one works out, because it's like, that's a big one. So we deal with the food chain, then we deal with, like, that milestone and what they're able to do with that. That is going to be a fun time. So those are my opinions on the issue. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also, like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.